We begin always with God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. We say praise be to Allah. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the public address of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. The title of this address is Islam, the Community of W.D. Muhammad and Moral Conscience, the question of a third resurrection. This public address is being live streamed on Facebook and YouTube, and everybody is invited to see it. Everybody is in for a treat in listening to this. The first speaker that I want to bring before you is the special assistant, the representative of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. I bring before you Imam Ibrahim El-Amin.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everyone hear me? It's been a while since I've been on here with you all. Most of the time I've only been able to listen. Praise be to Allah. We thank Allah. We bear witness that He alone is worthy of worship, and He alone has the authority over all of creation. And we bear witness that Muhammad, to whom the Quran was revealed, is His messenger and slave servant. Normally, this time is reserved for our Islamic studies class, which is focused on the special dua of Imam W.D. Muhammad. And this is some explanation for those who are watching us live and perhaps aren't familiar with how the class is structured and the history of the class, as well as some recent events. We had a plan initially to give the public address. The Imam had planned to give a public address, or a ta'aleem, I should say. Public address is not the correct language, but a ta'aleem in Mobile, Alabama, where one of the later speakers today, Imam Ronald El-Amin, served for some time as the Imam and has been known as a longtime supporter and pillar of the community there. However, that invitation was rescinded a few days before we were set to leave from our different locations to go to Mobile, Alabama. And man made it clear that we would use this time, or given that development, we would use this time to deliver the address that he intended to deliver in Mobile, Alabama. And as Imam Deen pointed out, and if you've seen the flyer, then the topic hasn't changed, just the format has changed a bit. Islam, the community of Imam W.D. Muhammad and moral conscience, the question of a third resurrection. Just as a note, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, watching us live on YouTube, we have a Q&A session at the end of the Imam, or after the Imam has concluded his presentation. We have a Q&A session. If you would like to participate in that, you can join us via Zoom. If you look in the description of the YouTube link that you're watching, if you look inside the description, there's the link to the Zoom meeting that we're in right now, and then you'll jump right into the meeting, and you'll raise your hand, and Imam Deen will open your microphone, and you can ask your question that way. Also, if you're not in a situation where you can be on camera, There's YouTube Live right along the side of the screen that you're watching. You can type in your question, and if we're able to see it in time, we'll present it, and the Imam can respond to it. So praise be to Allah. We, despite whatever setbacks that we have, we are always grateful for His favor on us. And we don't look at these setbacks as negatives necessarily. If we're thinking correctly, if we're thinking as believers should think, there are opportunities for us to learn and challenges for us to grow. And in some cases, Allah is showing us, in many cases, Allah is showing us something that will be critical for our success. One of the things that is special about this language of this topic, the question of the third resurrection. And there has been obviously talk and speculation, much of which you all are firsthand witnesses to, with regard to leadership after Imam W. Deen Mohammed. It's important to know that what we are looking at under these present circumstances is nothing that is alien to our experience as a people, and nothing that can't be traced to opposition that Imam W. Deen Mohammed encountered himself. As I understand it, this will be made available shortly, but recently Imam Rafiq Muhammad, who is well known for his work in preserving Imam W. Deen Muhammad's addresses in their recorded forms, has found a recording. He has a recording of Imam W. Deen Muhammad's resignation speech. This is not the convention speech of him addressing the great audience that was there, but this was the meeting or the speech that he gave directly to the leaders of the ASM and the body of imams, if you will, and perhaps some of their assistants that we might kind of collectively refer to as officials. And in it, it's not very long. It's not a long address. The imam is very succinct and brief, if you will, in terms of his reasons and what his advice to them. But something, I was listening to it a while ago, and something in it stood out to me. And I believe that Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad may have referenced this in a previous class, but I want to read the quote. My patience is long, but you all have brought me to the end of my patience. End quote. The ramifications of that particular event in our history is something that I believe that most of our people have not given the proper thought and consideration to. And I'm sure in his address today, the Imam will give some further explanation of it in terms of us understanding its importance and its significance. The opposition to the leadership of our community is something that has been there since its inception. We are aware of the story or of what transpired between the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the leaders of, or the more prominent leaders of the Nation of Islam at that time, when Mr. Farad stepped away and indicated that Elijah Muhammad should be the Supreme Minister of the Nation of Islam. We're also keenly aware of the opposition to Imam W. Deen Muhammad keenly, I say keenly aware because the history is more recent, that he faced in evolving the Nation of Islam from its proto-Islamic form or philosophy into a community of Muslims following the Quran and the life example of Muhammad the Prophet. The difficulty for us oftentimes is understanding the nature of that opposition, what that opposition looked like during the time that he was teaching after those initial years following his father's passing. It's important for us to appreciate that in Imam Muhammad's resignation, it wasn't just an administrative procedure or an administrative move. He was distinguishing himself. And in distinguishing himself, he was distinguishing those who truly followed his teaching, who truly believed in him as a leader, and who truly wanted to see our community continue along its natural path of evolution to achieve its destiny as a Muslim community. In that specific work, in that specific aim, and at critical moments, he continually pointed to Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad as being, quote, the person who has done more than any other person to help me, or the man who has done more than any other person to help me get the correct picture of Muslims and Imam W.D. Muhammad to the public of America and the world, end quote. So it's only natural that in this time, after his physical life with us, that opposition would continue. You know, they often dismiss the work that we are doing. They often dismiss us. They say, well, we're small in numbers. One particular person, he characterized it, he said, no one's gonna follow that but Hashim and that little brother in California, referring to me. However, some of you know my I guess you could say my background a little bit, and we all have skills and talents. You're aware of my profession, working in the visual arts of visual communication. And I can say from my own experience that if you were to look at the landscape of our community from the standpoint of language, in terms of how we communicate with each other, in terms of how we identify ourselves, the community of Imam W.D. Muhammad, in addition to the iconography that is associated with our community, but in many ways had been forgotten in the 15 years after those years after Imam Muhammad's passing. If you were to look at all of that, survey all of that, you can see a clear shift in focus and appreciation for specific language identifying us and specific iconography documenting the trajectory of our life and the leadership of our community. You can see a clear change in it after the publishing of Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad's first book, and when he began to offer commentary, even from prison. I was speaking with Professor Shabazz, whom you'll hear from lately, and I explained, I said, if you were just to do a Google search, you can track the date. Look at the number of times Imam Muhammad was being mentioned and quoted on social media platforms before a certain point and after a certain point. And it's clear that a lot more than Hashim and the little brother from California are paying attention to this. So we shouldn't underestimate our influence and the importance of the work that we're doing. We have together, praise be to Allah, and this was only achievable as a result of Allah's favor on us, and it's a sign to us that His favor is on us, that we have single-handedly, no, I shouldn't say single-handedly, but we have helped to change the language environment and the visual expression of our people. And I would say that although because of certain social conditions that we're faced with and psychological challenges that we have as a people, the most sensitive of our people, even if they're not able to express it verbally, they know this consciously. When they look at the landscape of our community, those who are visible, those who are working, they can see clearly that what Imam W.D. Muhammad was pointing to in those instances when he identified Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad as someone that he invited us to hear from now, and someone who had been instrumental in the success that his mission had seen. They can see that what Imam Muhammad was pointing to, and what he hinted at, is coming to pass. So with that, I'll conclude my comments and bring on the next speaker, who is a brother we're all familiar with, not just as the Imam in Ohio, but as the owner and founder of Element Priority Distributors, which is the maker of the well-known and well-regarded, and I think well-appreciated, much appreciated, Bilalian wear, Imam Terenzo Element.
Thank you, Imam Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, viewing audience. My name is Terenzo El-Amin. I have resided in Cincinnati, Ohio since 2003. And recently, I was asked to be the Imam of Bilal Ibn Rabah Islamic Center in Columbus, Ohio, about 100 miles away. And I have accepted. Praise be to Allah. I was asked today to share my experience prior to me discovering the successor to Imam W.D. Muhammad, the one that would revive and continue in the way that Imam W.D. Muhammad prepared him and conditioned us. In the time period of 2017 and 2018, I began to realize in my soul that something was not right. Our congregation here in Cincinnati, Ohio, began to dwindle and age. The group spirit was not that spirit I was accustomed to during the life of Imam W.D. Muhammad. No new people were embracing the religion. We were just talking to ourselves on Friday and at the Sunday Ta'aleem. At that time here in Cincinnati, I led the Friday prayers at least once a month. I facilitated our Ta'aleem discussions frequently. I was the one who cleaned the building for years in preparation for our Juma service. I was depended on. I and my wife were considered workers in the community. The local imam during the year 2018 and early 2019 wanted to retire from being the resident imam after 29 years here locally. I recall him wanting to retire from that position more than once, but this time it was imminent. The imam at that time said to me that he had told a group of brothers who supported strongly his leadership over those 29 years. he told them that he was retiring, and he told me their response to him. Who is going to be the imam? Torenzo? To suggest to me I should take up this huge responsibility. I had during that time period had an in-depth discussion with the local leadership about our condition. Our group was getting older and smaller. I had numerous conversations with the local imam in 2017 and 2018 about the need for us to have public messaging. This is before I found Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. I told the local imam, we have to make this message. We have to take this message from behind the four walls of the center and out into the public. The imam at that time agreed with me. I suggested way back in 2018 that we need to give public addresses to reach the people. The imam told me, Torenzo, only myself and you will be qualified to do that. My wife can tell you, during that time, I was really burdened by our community's condition and the thought that I may have to carry the weighty responsibility of being imam. And I had no answer on how to revive the situation here locally. In preparation for our Savior's Day brunch in the year 2019, myself and wife, with the assistance of the person that is the imam at the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center now, this was in February of 2019, we prepared a brunch for Savior's Day. And as I was preparing to get information for the Savior's Day, I came across information on the internet that a National Savior's Day event will be taking place in the Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina area. And on the advertisement, I seen a picture of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, who I was familiar with when Imam W.D. Muhammad was alive. I immediately began to search Google for days to find anything on the one I remember as in the special role of Imam W.D. Muhammad's representative and special assistant. I'm reading the commentary that was available at that time from Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, and I am becoming reassured and comforted with solid answers addressing our situation. From reading that, I knew then that Imam W.D. Muhammad Wade does live unobstructed. I brought to the community here locally, I brought to the leadership that I had found what I had found regarding leadership from Imam W.D. Muhammad's most trusted representative. As I kept asking the local imam questions, I could feel the pushback with no satisfactory answer coming. And then one Friday, the local imam gave me a folder. And after Juma, I opened what he gave me in the car as I was leaving. Its contents was paperwork, the United States of America versus Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. Mind you, I knew his physical location and loosely the circumstances. I heard much that sickened me as an attack on the personal character of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, but my soul would not let me drink it down. Oh, this infuriated me immediately, being given paperwork that is supposed to conclude any more questions. I'm a person that heard Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching at 20 years old while sentenced to a 43 to 75 year sentence for a crime I did not commit. I interpreted what the local imam gave me to say, first, shut up asking about him. He's a criminal. And secondly, if you have been to prison with that taint, you hold no more value. It's forfeited. That's how I interpreted what he gave me and what he was saying. Around this time, I'm still leading the Juma prayers and I'm using the commentary of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. The people have no complaint. I'm giving his commentary without saying his name. But I do believe the local leader knew exactly what I was doing. A few months later, we are in the blessed month of Ramadan. This is May 2019. And a Ramadan session was being held in Durham, North Carolina under the emerging leadership of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. Myself and another person, a native of Cincinnati, was intending to drive 8 hours to be in attendance, starting with Juma on Friday. That morning, that Friday morning, the Cincinnati native was a no-show. I went to pick him up, no response. So now I'm like, Terenzo, you were committed to this research endeavor. I wanted to confirm with my own eyes that this is real. So I made the 8-hour drive by myself to North Carolina for the first time. And it was one of the best decisions that I had ever made. What I saw there confirmed for me, this is where I am supposed to be. I met there 3 strong brothers for the first time at that event. Imam Rafiq Muhammad, Atlanta, Georgia, Imam Hashim Abdullah, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Imam Ibrahim El-Amin, Southern California. Once leaving on that Sunday, after that 2-day event in Durham, North Carolina, I called the local imam and expressed to him the condition and the state of our congregation and the community of Imam W.D. Muhammad. This was a direct conversation between 2 men. It became intense, so intense I had to pull over. I believe it was Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where I pulled over. And we had an intense discussion for at least 3 hours. A lot came out in that discussion to the point I made up my mind that I had to separate from these people. I told the resident imam of the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center in concluding our conversation, we will compete and we will see who will have the better results. That's language from Imam W.D. Muhammad that he told a person who challenged the direction of his leadership of the community. And on that day, the next day, Monday, Memorial Day, 2019, following that intense exchange, I sent out a letter via email renouncing our membership, me and my wife, at the Cincinnati Islamic Community Center, and I gave clear reason. I didn't want innuendos and half-truths to be circulated on my wife and I renouncing membership without our voice being heard. I began sharing with all the Muslims I knew from this association my position and stance and reasoning forward, and it got a lot of attention. I was met with skepticism and even some people alluding Terenzo has lost his mind, when just a short few months prior, who was going to be the imam? Terenzo? These same people were willing to entrust me with the local position of imam. I have always been a worker since my re-entry back into society in 2000. My wife comes from a family of workers in this community. We called for a meeting with members of the local masjid in our association. I wanted to have a meeting at the Islamic Center, but that was not allowed, so we had a serious meeting about leadership and why I took the stance to address not just our local situation, but the situation nationally. I saw this as bigger than local. Who else has the strict and disciplined attachment to Imam W.D. Muhammad and his reasoning, emphasis, language, and has experience? It's not even close if you judge fairly, as Allah instructs, as Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. From that meeting, in 2019, we established Masjid Muhammad, a name legally registered with the state of Ohio. We found space to meet and conducted Juma prayers for approximately 6 months after support dwindled and COVID hit us in early 2020. We, meaning my wife and I, took on the big responsibility to host Savior's Day in February 2020 here in Cincinnati, right before the onslaught of COVID. Mind you, our leader is still unjustly detained. We had people telling us it wasn't legitimate because our leader's confinement, but we kept going and had the first of 4 successful Savior's Day observances here in this city, where temple number 5 was established, Cincinnati, Ohio. Proceeding forward from the Imam's inaugural public address after being released in May of 2020, he gave a powerful public address that included, in its understanding, on Bilalian and its importance. In August of 2020 of that year, I was inspired to promote the rich idea and understanding of Bilalian through beautiful apparel, Bilalian is language and reasoning that Imam W.D. Muhammad introduced for the first time in 1975, even changing the name of the community paper from Muhammad Speaks to Bilalian News. We designed and made available our website, ElaminePriorityDistributors.com, in December 2020. Praise be to Allah. We also have introduced our local delicious Navy bean pies, original in the Cincinnati #5 to people outside of Cincinnati. By introducing this in our Bilalian apparel and literature at various public addresses around the country in support of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad's leadership. We have been to Atlanta, Newark, Philadelphia, Rochester, Washington, D.C. with our products, and I believe this is just the beginning. We have received excellent reviews from our customers regarding our excellent products. For our Bilalian apparel, we even have a slogan, look good while making a profound statement, wear Bilalian. We have big plans for the future in getting this public message to the masses by giving our support to the leadership of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. Really, Imam W.D. Muhammad's leadership continued by his successor. I recall where this group that identify in the continuity of Imam W.D. Muhammad's blessed leadership. I remember at that time that I came around in 2019, I didn't foresee this much progress in such a short period of time. I recognize what we face, and I ask Allah for success and victory in restoring Imam W.D. Muhammad's way solidly and visibly back into the American public. I thank Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad for allowing me this space to speak to you. Allah's blessings, peace be upon you.
Thank you, Imam Teresa. Praise be to Allah. Our next speaker is someone that we're all familiar with and has a very keen insight in terms of understanding our place in history, as well as what is required for us to achieve our place in the future. Professor Wali Shabazz.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
With Allah's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. All praise are due to Allah, the Lord of all systems of knowledge. In 1860, a slave ship by the name of Clotilda landed in Mobile, Alabama. And it had 110 slaves, Africans, kidnapped from the continent, brought to Mobile, Alabama. The significance of that is that the importation of Africans to the continental United States was illegal at that point in time by the United States government. So this was a double illegal importation of people from the continent of Africa to America. The great significance in that is they established their own community in Mobile, Alabama, Africa Town. It's well known. 60 Minutes did a report on it. It's known in the continent, on the continent of Africa, and many of the people in that town can trace their ancestry directly to the country Benin. Okay. In approximately 2002, the Imam of Mobile, Alabama, Imam Ronald Ali, had contacted Imam W.D. Muhammad's office and had made a bold step in wanting to host our national convention. So Imam Muhammad had sent the national representative of his office, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, to look at, search out, question, and verify the validity of Mobile, Alabama, hosting our national convention. It was a 3-day event. The Imam invited me to go with him to Mobile and make an assessment of the validity of that environment hosting our convention. There was a Jummah prayer that Imam Earl Abdul Malik served as the khatib to the Jummah prayer. There were representatives from throughout the South there for that weekend, including the convener, the national convener from our community. After the erudite presentation presented at the Jummah prayer, the community was inspired and uplifted and felt a great satisfaction of the spiritual experience under the insight and leadership of Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, the khatib at the Jummah prayer. We were hosted by the city of Mobile, taken to 4 or 5 different hotels, treated as diplomats, with the idea of the possibility that Imam Muhammad's community would be hosted by the city of Mobile, Alabama. Now, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad was representing the leader and was an exemplary example of a representation of that leadership. The current Imam of Mobile, Alabama, who rescinded this invitation, was present, recognizing the scholarship, the dignity, and the Islamic adab of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, and was impressed. The community had hosted a dinner. The Imam had spoke at that dinner. Everyone was completely inspired and greatly satisfied by the behavior and dignity of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad and his representation of the leadership of Imam W.D. Muhammad. Also was present were members of a delegation of diplomats from the country of Benin, where the descendants from that country landed in Mobile, Alabama in 1860. And the Benin government apologized to African Americans for the enslavement of other African people and the condition that they rendered as a result of that enslavement. All of this took place this very weekend in 2001, 2002. So the point that I'm addressing here is that that community is aware of the insight, dignity, and the potential leadership that this man represents. This man, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. I'm going to make a statement right now. This community has its leaders have a strategy. Leadership is local. Or if they do have a meeting that addresses the concept of leadership as in Orlando, Florida next month. It's anybody but Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. They'll have programs and have 20 guest speakers, and none of them programs will invite anybody, will invite everybody, but ignore the erudite scholarship, the words of Imam W.D. Muhammad, who spoke, pointed to a leader that would come in the future who would be just like him. They ignore the fact that it was, as Imam Torrendo pointed out, that the leadership of Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad was the best mind in aiding our evolution in this society. Why is anybody but Abdul Malik the strategy of the so-called leaders of this community? You tell me, would Abu Bakr tell Uthman after the passing of the Prophet, I got Medina, you go take Mecca, because leadership is local? Would the Algerians in the 19th century, who were underneath the rulership of the French, say that my city is local, your city is local, you just take control of your own environment? Where can you go anywhere in the Muslim world where you will hear the statement, leadership is local? Or they ignore the best minds from amongst them and pull together a group, and that group ignore the best mind that the former leader, the charismatic leader of that community, recognized as the one who was best suited to support him and to ultimately lead him. Imam W.D. Muhammad made a statement to our Imam and said, you are a combination of me and my father. And he said, but you're too young to know my father. But you know him better than most of my ministers know him. Look, man, what are we going to do about the death of our community? What are we going to do about weak men who are not standing up to other men who have their own personal agenda, who know the wisdom and the insight of what our brother represents, ignore it, scandalize it, and try to intimidate people who want to support it? You go all over the Muslim world, all over the continent of Africa, which is our home, and show me where the concept of local leadership or the concept of weak leadership will gain those people who are sovereign nations a sense of independence for themselves. It was designed in America that the so-called American Negro would never unite. And every time a united effort was established to move us from one level of ignorance to a level of dignity, that movement was usurped. You think this is any different? The brother of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the supreme captain and tried to kill him. Very popular men in the Nation of Islam, when we made the transition in the second resurrection, they left Imam W.D. Muhammad. And now some of them are the experts on our community. And you allow these men to come into your presence and talk to your people about our evolution and what Imam W.D. Muhammad represents. And they left him early. Men standing at the Wailing Wall, making dua, representing our community. Total disrespect of leadership that was born out of our evolution in this society that we need to support. Naysayers, liars. Ask the man yourself if you have a question. Read the website. Do your own independent study. We have to stand as a people supporting the leadership that we have come to a rational conclusion on our own using, look, man, if an imam is standing in front of a congregation for Jummah prayer, and he's leading the prayer in Salah, and he makes a mistake, he errs in the recitation of the Quran. They don't snatch him from leading the congregation. The congregation corrects him, and we continue the Salah. Allah's mercy extends over his justice. Why you want to bring a justice with no mercy? What kind of Muslim is you? Come on, man. Stand up and be a man. We got work to do. We have lost our reputation in America. We are no longer the go-to group in getting an understanding for what this society looks like, what the vision is for our future, and what we used to represent. It's gone. But leadership is local. Carter G. Woodson, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, all said there are two groups from us that are the hardest to bring together to make a change for the entire community. It's the educated class of Negro and the preacher class of Negro. This peculiar institution of chattel slavery and the overrepresentation of religious men over us have skewed the direction for rational evolution in our community as an ethnic group of people in this society. The educated class and the preacher class. And many of these imams come out of the preacher class. They're not teaching Deen al-Islam, they're teaching their Islam. And over these small houses, over a small congregation that's graying, so they can have their own fiefdom. We need broad minds. We need universal thinking. We need the teachings and the direction and the insight of Imam W.D. Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Praise be to Allah. At this time, I'm going to bring before you an imam from the city that Professor Shabazz started talking about. Imam Ronald Ali. This is a man of the people. I have a little bit of experience with him and seeing how he interacts with people in his presence on a day-to-day basis. This is a man who is a follower of Imam W.D. Muhammad, and he had the correct sensitivities to be able to recognize the legitimate continuation of Imam W.D. Muhammad's leadership in his successor, Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad. I bring before you at this time, Imam Ronald Ali.
Assalamu alaikum. Dear Muslims, we come behind the professor. And you know, the professor asked me for a lot of information, and I'm glad I gave it to him because I don't like talking about myself. But as it relates to work, let us discuss the work. As a worker, the Imam asked me if there would be an opportunity to come to Mobile. I requested this opportunity from the local Imam, and it was granted. Time passed, and we received an initial challenge by a few brothers, and that was overcome, and we continued. This Tuesday, I was called and asked to attend a meeting on Wednesday night at Maghrib Salat, and in that meeting, I learned that the invitation had been rescinded. I listened in that meeting because it was important to listen as to what were the conditions that would reverse an invitation and then to rescind it so close to the date of the address. I learned that there was a small group who had been influenced by an outside group to remember why they feel Imam Abdul Malik should not be allowed to come into Mobile. They reflected to this group the charges that the Muslim Journal placed upon him, not the actual charges. They also brought into contention, and it was made a big contention, almost like a crime in itself, that you would consider placing as a part of your resume that you are the successor to Imam W.D. Muhammad. This visit was seen as an opportunity for Imam Abdul Malik to take a leadership position of the Muslims that followed Imam W.D. Muhammad. They felt that it would establish him as that national leader. Surely it would, because it would not establish him as a national leader, but establish him as the voice of reason in a time in which we need someone to reason. The first of those who reason with the leadership style of Imam W.D. Muhammad. That voice is clear. Whenever I would give them his book or others, they will say, he just sounds like the Imam. I'm listening, saying, well, who else do you want him to sound like? And it was a confirmation that this is the first one to come in the leadership style of Imam W.D. Muhammad amongst all of the Imams that are in the association with the Imam. After I was told to rescind, I called immediately so that I could follow the instructions of the office of the Imam. I was told to stand by. I received that. But in the interim, I offered my resignation from all of the responsibilities that I had once held within the community as the core leadership model, the interfaith models, the business models, the activists within the community, to remove that. Because if I'm to stay in a body like that, that is representative, because Mobile is a reflection of the decline and the death of our leadership spirit in America that we once had. I'll say that again. Mobile is a reflection of the decline and death of our leadership spirit that evolved from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that the Imam W.D. Muhammad placed in context, and that now we see it arising again. I say to you that, in my opinion, that this is a setup for our leadership to continue in Mobile and internationally. I began to think, how would this city progress without our leadership being hampered? Because it was becoming oppressive for me to be within the community, hearing the comments, seeing the behavior of our people not being serious about what the work actually is. It was clearly rituals over practices. The focus within our communities is more ritualism over the actual practices. What is the ritual saying, rather than what is the intent for human life? How can it grow? How can it progress? And the message that True Islam promotes, we find that best representation comes from the leadership style of Imam Muhammad and the Muslim American Ministry for Human Salvation, and our leader, in which we support, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, has those sensitivities. This is what drew me to him. I'm from a leadership style that started in 1978. I became interested in Islam while being a local leader, a radio talk show host. I met Mayor John Smith before he became mayor. All of what the professor said about the delegations, but we set that up because that's the spirit. I was of the opinion that we are an international body. Leadership is not local. We have an international responsibility, but we must not forget the responsibility that we have to our people. So in this movement, interfaith-wise, I've been a secretary, second vice president, first vice president, and the president of an interdenominational ministerial alliance, which is churches, temples in Mobile, Alabama. I resigned after 25 years as the imam in Mobile to pursue an activist life. The demand that people had on my life and my family, I had enough of that. I moved out to not be unhampered at that time. And when that was done, I became active in the NAACP as an activist. Presently, I'm over 4 states, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, and Alabama. And when the congressional race in Atlanta elected the first African-American to the Senate and then re-elected him, the committee that I chair was responsible for networking to get him in office. So the Muslim identity that we have is the ambassador of righteousness and good deeds, good acts. This is appealing to the people. So I feel that I was also liberated when I moved away from this congregation that is reflective of this dying breed. And, you know, I know death. I'm a funeral director. I know all the signs of death, spiritually, most importantly, that people are waiting in these masajids and centers just to die. They're planning on living on the rituals. When I moved to Columbus, Ohio, early in my life, the masjid that I attended, Imam Wali Muhammad, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's nephew and Imam Muhammad's first cousin, was the imam. When I came there, he turned everything over to me and I became imam. I worked within the Midwest region as their secretary as a young man in the state of Ohio. We did the things that were needed to be done. When the imam passed, I had a relationship with Imam Kazim Ahmed, which I formed in Atlanta, Georgia. Imam Kazim was being ignored at that particular time. No one would talk to him. It was clearly visible that people would walk around him. And I'm speaking of my relationship then. I walked up to him, I embraced him. After that embrace, others embraced him because I'm not a coward. I have courage of my convictions as a Muslim and as a man, and I'm steadily growing in that. I mention this only to say that after the Imam passed, because of my relationship with him, we began Ramadan on the Gulf Coast. Ramadan on the Gulf Coast hosted Imam Darnell Kareem, Imam Nasser Ahmed, Yahya Abdullah, Muhammad Abdullah from Birmingham, and any imam that you would think of that is in the Southwest region or in the Midwest because of my relationships. And then all of the young leaders that you see traveling around the country, they came through this matriculation. So what we're saying is Mobile is this important, the flagship, I say, on the Gulf Coast in the South. And because of that, Mobile could not be the center for such a wonderful event. And I learned this thought of leadership is local. A letter was sent in the conclusion of this discussion with these brothers. The Imam said, I sent a letter to the regional and the national majlis to say that Mobile's position is that we are not in favor of a national leader. I was trying to figure out where that comes from, but I know where it comes from. It's the continuation of the thinking to have a few to rule over the many, when our mission is to address the many so that they continue to be enlightened to what the real message for humanity is coming from this leadership body. I'm an imam in support of the Muslim American Ministry. Its leader, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, and I conclude with this. in the following of Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, came many years ago a leader by the name of Salahuddin, the liberator of Jerusalem. Further, in the midst of time, came a leader by the name of Imam W.D. Muhammad, and he made his stance and his impression upon this international community. And the first, I believe, in that leadership style is Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, whose reach will not be declined or stifled by these acts, but increase because of what spirit is being placed within him and in us. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you, Brother Imam Ronald, for those comments. So the Imam is here. I was asked to introduce him, and I will just say a few words. And I guess I'm coming from a more personal point of view. My mother, when she was carrying me, when she was pregnant with me, she would play the addresses of Imam W.D. Muhammad. She would hold them against her belly and play them for me. And I was, I'm told this, and I only recently discussed or asked her about it, perhaps a few months ago. And she said, she thought for a moment and she said, I asked her why she did it. And she paused for a moment and she thought, and she said, more than anything, I wanted your Islamic identity to be shaped by him. And I'm thinking back on my own adolescence, and as you're coming into adulthood, you become aware of certain things, you become conscious and sensitive to more serious matters. And I met Imam Abdul Malik Muhammad when I was 18 years old. And I believe I've expressed this to him. But I'm a young man at the time, and I'm thinking about, my responsibility to the community, and also what the future of the community would look like. And, you're receiving encouragement from older members who are saying, well, you're coming into adulthood, into manhood, and, some of these responsibilities will one day be yours. And you can't help in those circumstances but think of what the community will look like, but also what leadership will look like moving forward. And it was clear to me even then who was best at 18 years old, the young age of 18, who was qualified or who was most qualified to succeed Imam W.D. Muhammad in the leadership of our people. I just had that as a feeling then. Praise be to Allah, through experience and through knowledge, it is more of a conviction for me now, almost 18 more years later, praise be to Allah. So with that, I ask that you give your attention to the leader of the people of Imam W.D. Muhammad, and the one that he identified as his successor, Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Praise be to Allah. The guardian, evolver, and cherisher, the Lord of all the systems of knowledge. We believe in him. We put our faith and trust in him. He has created everything to benefit from his mercy. And that creation to whom he has given the greater portion, the greatest portion of his mercy, in whom he cares in a way higher than all that he has created, is human life or human beings or mankind. We witness that nothing is deserving of worship except him. And we witness that Mohammed, his messenger, is also his servant and a model life, a model example for human life, human individuals and human groups. And there is a qualification for that model, that he is a model for any who believe in God, that have the disposition to look to God for guidance, support, stability, deliverance from what troubles man. And he is the model for those who feel themselves accountable to God for their conduct. That means that they seek his aid and forgiveness for their shortcomings in the interest of improving, bettering themselves. So Muhammad is a model human life for people like that. In that reference from the Quran is not mentioning the Islamic community. It's understood to be that, but it's not mentioning the Muslim community in particular. It says that Muhammad is an excellent example for any who believe in God, reflect on God much, look to God much, often, and anticipate a day of accounting or a day of judgment. Well, we've had an education today, and I've listened carefully to those who have presented today, and we have learned much. I'm thankful for such men and their commitments and their determinations and their knowledge and their wisdom and their clarity of expression and their truthfulness, in their integrity. Serious men. I'm going to make reference to something in the Bible in the context of this presentation today. And let me just make the reference first and then say something about the Bible. Reference is to the story of Jacob and Esau, his brothers, twin brothers. And I'm going to give some more commentary on this, but I'm just wanting to present it to you. This one particular thing said that there was a point at which clearly they were separated and had established themselves independent of one another, and says that Esau visited Jacob, and with him were 400 men. It has a lot of important meaning. And we're going to have some discussion on it as I continue. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad he said that the Bible is the graveyard of our people. And his sensitivities for making such a statement were obviously shaped by his teacher, but also by his own experience. And it speaks to a degree of victimization on the part of those who would manipulate the word of God to manipulate human behavior and human thinking. And if you're not in the discussion or understanding how that manipulation is taking place, then what you're looking at as a reference or as a source for guidance is really trouble in your life. So without the proper kinds of interpretations and understanding, you'll be burdened, and it will create a kind of death for you. And most of people looking at divine guidance, they're not in a position to understand its teaching, and especially teaching that is shrouded in symbolism and coded language. You can see where the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, from where he's coming, when he says that the Bible is the graveyard of our people. That's just a side note as I present to you this material I have today. We greet each other as Muslims, Assalamu alaikum. And it's translated, peace be on you. And Assalam is one of the names of God. So by reasoning, we could say that we are saying God be with you. And also the word Islam, given al-Islam in the Quran, is of the same root, foundation for the word salam. And Islam is referring to a system of submission or resignation to the will of God that is the standard for peace. And it has important essential components. Arabic speaking people and persons in the community of Muhammad the Prophet, when he spoke of Islam, they weren't immediately able to understand its meaning. They did not know the word Islam. They knew how to approach the meaning, but they didn't know the word Islam. And by way of the guidance from in the Quran revealed to Muhammad the Prophet and his teaching, influenced by that guidance, directed by that guidance, and his teaching coming from recognition of the excellence of human life in its original creation or form, he explained to them what is the meaning. And related to that is also identity, human life in identity, according to those teachings of what Islam is. And we know that that word is Muslim. And Muslim is understood to be one who follows the religion of Islam. That's the immediate understanding, but also importantly, it's a reference to nature, the nature of human creation and the nature of creation itself. That creation, and particularly human creation, is originated for its highest purpose and performance to identify or to become conscious through man's evolution to consciousness. And God says in the Quran that he has caused and he created everything that exists to yield its benefits or utility to man. Is that speaking of its nature, its essential construction, purpose, science, communication, guidance, everything that exists is given purpose to serve man. So the earth itself has evolved an intelligent part of itself. And that intelligent part of itself is man. And the most comprehensive identity for man as an intelligent evolution of the earth or creation itself, the most comprehensive identity is Muslim. And the more evolved that Muslim life is, and seeks for guidance and the disciplines that will hold it to its purpose, so as to guarantee maximum and highest, most excellent performance that is a conscious Muslim, follower of Muhammad, the messenger of God, and one devoting themselves to God's guidance. In the Quran, there's a verse that says, وَإِنَّهُ لِتَذْكِرَةٌ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Certainly, this Quran is a reminder of those who are regardful. And the reference is to shape the thinking and the reasoning of those who are regardful. That the Quran shapes the thinking, focuses the thinking and reasoning. And that goes from personal life, personal conduct, personal choices, to relationships and discipline within those relationships between human beings. And it graduates ultimately to the disposition of communities in relationship to God, in acknowledgement of his authority, in expression of recognition that in order to achieve the highest community existence or human life in society, that man must obey his creator. Every community that comes into consciousness has the responsibility to manage their affairs in the earth. That management cannot be turned over to others to manage for them. If it is turned over to others, there is a punishment. There is a kind of curse that comes into the life of that people that has abandoned their responsibility to accept responsibility to manage their affairs. It can take many forms, but its characteristics are unmistakable. One example of a people who are under the punishment of mismanaging or abandoning the responsibility to make a contribution to human life independent of others. One characteristic of a group that has abandoned that is the denial of leadership. The refusal to accept responsibility to support the most responsible, highest expression of the soul within that people, to accept responsibility for their life and manage their life. A people who have been the victim of manipulation and strategy of that particular responsibility. are excused a punishment. And history says that they're given, awarded, promised a special relationship with their creator. I say history says. Historical references to oppressed people yields for us knowledge of how to address the schemes of oppression. A discovery of human purpose preserved in the life history of peoples becomes most apparent to us when we study how they establish themselves after they have been oppressed. The African American people can't convince the Irish that the nature of their oppression is any worse. Wouldn't want to argue the point. Because there's much to learn from the progress of all peoples against, as I said, schemes to oppress them. What of a people that oppress themselves? As the Quran says, Inni zalamtu nafsi. Surely I have oppressed myself. That is a question that we have to consider when we're talking about the community of Imam W. Deen Mohammed and the question of a third resurrection. And what is reference? What is the context for this phrase, third resurrection? In the language of Imam W. Deen Mohammed, in his teaching, in the earliest days of his leadership of the Nation of Islam, he referred to the leadership of his father and that history up to the point of his becoming leader as the first resurrection or first experience. And that was to qualify and to characterize the second resurrection. If there's a first, there's a second, which in part would explain steps in the overall strategy of the first teachers of the Nation of Islam idea, steps toward a particular destination. That particular destination was correct thinking, taking into consideration the influence of oppression and oppressive tactics, but to correct the thinking of a people so as to enable them to become responsible for themselves, to manage their affairs as a autonomous community of human beings, accepting responsibility to make a contribution to the progress of human life. So there was a first experience that is best described as the reignition of a people's lifeline. A people denied what? Rights in America? Citizenship in America? No. That is just a particular context for that denial. The denial was of human entitlements, human life, all manner of schemes and artifice enabled to usurp from that people their human labor without regard for their human soul and conscience. An oppression of the body and an oppression of the spirit. To load a people up with references to their physique, their physical, their physiology, and to say that it is of a nature different, less than, and even a spoiling of beauty. As Malcolm Shabazz, the well-known representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, would say, who taught you that your nose is ugly, that your lips are ugly, that your hair is ugly, that your skin is ugly? Who taught you that? In other words, for what purpose were you taught that? We identify the who, but for what purpose? To take something out of your life, to load a people up with that burden, not to mention the psychology. Physiology is one thing, but not to mention also the psychology, to make war on their human spirit. So as to do what? To cripple their ability to come to the conclusion or to reason that they must be responsible for themselves, that they must manage themselves. For what purpose? Manage themselves in the context of the evolution of intelligent life, to make a contribution to the excellence of man in society on this earth. Mr. W.D. Farad, coming from the context of religion, not just, well, you know, there's evidence that he was influenced by Hinduism and Jainism and Buddhism, that there are references there in his teaching, but mostly Christianity. Taken from these disciplines and teachings, particularly Christianity, because it was in the Christian context that he found a people. And he took from the Bible, and he, in the story of Jesus Christ, says that Jesus Christ to cure or to address the blindness of a man, that he put mud on the man's eyes. And right away, the man could see. Strategy of Mr. W.D. Farad. The first experience, the first resurrection, bring a people to eventually use divine guidance to shape their thinking, their reasoning, so as to prepare them to be a contributor toward the excellence of human life in society. This intent coming directly from the Quran. So here's Mr. W.D. Farad introducing the Quran into the life of the African American people. So as to what? Free them to become a responsible entity, to become an independently autonomous, responsible entity. To influence in them that they, like all people, have their own relationship with God. That God formed them in their pictures and made their pictures of the same shared excellence that he made all mankind. But they have a particular history, a particular point of view, shaped within the experiences of that history. And that even if they were to give it up, those particular circumstances and the demand on them would walk with them, even in their abandonment of their special position. It would still walk with them. They would never feel comfortable that they have achieved what they should achieve. And that's why African American people can go to Africa and have a rewarding experience and even consider leaving America to live in Africa. And some have done that, but still, in spite of that African environment, they carry the spirit and the burden of the African American consciousness. And that spirit is to ultimately address the demand in their nature to be responsible for their affairs. Not just as individuals, but as a community. As a community to be responsible, to manage their affairs, to grow into responsibility and management of their life in community. How could I turn over responsibility to interpret what leadership should be to an order of leaders that Imam W. Deen Mohammed separated himself from? How could I, with my relationship with him, And no one would argue, not a reasonable person. No one would argue that I didn't have a special relationship with him. I had once an interaction with one of his children. And this person may not be the person you think, you all might be thinking. This child of his asked me a question and I responded. And my response to them was an indication to them that I had something different in terms of my understanding and also my relationship with their father. And they commented to that. They said, when I responded, the eyes got bright and they said, you know things, you understand things. I understood what that meant. Knowing what Imam W. Deen Mohammed shared with me, that he made known to others, and also that he made known to the whole community of his following. Being shaped by that, being influenced by that, being obligated by that. So many things that were said to me personally that were echoed publicly in the language of public expression. Some things you say to a person individually, privately, you may not share the details of that publicly, but the spirit of that is shared publicly. So when Imam W. Deen Mohammed, when he said to his whole following that this person has helped me more than any other to get the correct picture of Muslims and the correct picture of Imam W. Deen Mohammed to America and the world, isn't that synonymous with saying to me privately, you are a combination of my father and myself? It's saying the same thing. What my Imam W. D. Muhammad is saying, what my father had as an objective lives in me, Imam W. D. Muhammad. And what I have as an objective lives in this representative. So therefore, what the two leaders have as objective lives in this person. And I want you to know him. Stand up so they can see you. And that was symbolic because I had to stand up in many cities, including Mobile, Alabama. Wasn't coming there in my name. I was coming there in the name of his office as the leader of our community. And today, I was to be there in the same capacity. When my use and definition of successor is questioned in the spirit of this present leadership's criticism of me, essentially, when That question is a disputing of Imam W.D. Muhammad in the name of and with the support of leaders he publicly and permanently separated himself from. In 2003, Imam W.D. Muhammad separated himself, distinguished himself from the body of leaders. And that moment was the nativity of the history of the next leader. There would be no possible way for the next leader not to also distinguish himself or herself from that order. Not by statement or statement of resignation, because that resignation itself was just machinery that highlighted a group that had a different perspective, a different agenda, a different interpretation of what our life was supposed to be. So profound and so well established in them that the leader of the community distinguished himself from it and from them. How is it possible that now a person formed like I was is to feel comfortable with their definition of what leadership should be for our community? From whom did Imam W.D. Muhammad resign? Was it from a minority of them? If it had been a minority of them, a group of small influence, the act itself would not have been necessary. He was resigning from the overwhelming majority of them. And it was only a minority of them that accepted him. It would not be possible that the next leader would not study that, would not understand that, and would not take the same important steps to distinguish himself from that. Mobile, Alabama, and the masjid there is not unique unto itself. There is not one masjid under these kind of leaders that would invite me or host me to come and visit them. Not one. But mind you, just a few months ago, I asked one of our imams who was with me, and they accepted him readily. Imam Duhan, he visited there. Have no trouble with him. He's associated with my leadership, but have trouble with me. But that's not unique to Mobile. It's in Newark. There's not a masjid in Newark in association of Imam W.D. Muhammad that they say that would invite me. But yet some of you all attend those masjids. There's not a masjid in Washington, D.C., my home, that would invite me. There's not a masjid under any of these persons, no matter what my circumstances were, that would invite me. And the question that has to be asked and answered clearly is why? I had an exchange with the person who wrote the article that appeared in the Muslim Journal recently. And I said to him that I'm aware that you are the author of that article. He never acknowledged it. He never owned it. But yet, he wants me to own what he said about me. What does that say about the reasoning of such persons that are in the leadership of this group? The question of a third resurrection. Resurrection is a reference to isolating and setting aside the burden of death. That death does not hold the life. That death is not the determinant factor for the life. That out of conditions that would suggest death or report that death is imminent, out of those conditions come new life. When the wife of Isaac, Rebekah, was pregnant, according to the Bible, she was inspired to understand that pregnancy to be two nations. What stirred in Imam Terenzo El-Amin of Cincinnati, Ohio, and now the Imam of Columbus, Ohio? What stirred in him, as he describes it? And these are not my words. These are his words. What stirred in him? He was what? He was troubled by the impending death. He was sensing the death. He was a witness to the death. But his spirit lived. Death all around, but a spirit to live. Flesh conditions the spirit for progress. What is this flesh without the spirit to live? It's dead matter. What was the flesh of the former slave without the reignition of Mr. Farad's influence to direct that life to Quranic guidance and Islamic or Muslim identity, except dead matter? What was the consciousness of the slave without a new appreciation for their humanity that came into the language of Frederick Douglass, except dead matter? And what is the condition of a group coming from the influence of Mr. W.D. Farad's strategy and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's leadership, and Imam W. Deen Muhammad's leadership and insight, that refuses where that leadership tradition points to as a continuation in the consciousness. What is it that when it does not embrace that consciousness, but dead matter? What is a people in their original forming to serve a purpose, to establish the principles of management of human society, that have left their better tradition for something lesser, have bartered their better life for something inferior, have taken their independent, autonomous mind and replaced it with other minds, accept dead matter to their purpose. How is it possible that anyone would expect that Imam W. Deen Muhammad's successor would accept the reasoning of people that he separated himself from, that he resurrected that life from, distinguished himself from? How is it possible that a whole group of people will accept the reasoning for what leadership looks like, how it is to express itself, how it is to represent our life? How is it possible that a whole people will adopt that group's opinion of how our life should be presented, to the exclusion of the person, that the leader that they say they embrace and that they express themselves through his identity and his language that he identified for them? Oh, brother, he didn't say you were going to be the next leader. He most certainly did. He said it over and over again. Reasoning with the better of our people to know what to look for. Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau is a discussion on the relationship between the spirit of man and the flesh of man. And that's one reference. And it's an important reference. But in another reading, it is a discussion on the maturity of the sensitivities of communities and how they should organize themselves, how they should preserve their knowledge, how they should establish their interests, and the things that they have to guard against to protect their interests for establishment. It is said in this story that Esau was red, of red hue, and that his descendants, the word itself means red, and that he was hairy. He had a lot of body hair. And by way of a scheme, his brother received the birthright, or his birthright, by disguising himself as Harry, and with a special kind of internal vigor or strength, as seen in the activity and discipline of a hunter. Says that Esau was a hunter, and that Isaac, the father of Esau and Jacob, that he asked that Esau bring to him the product of his hunting to feed him. In another place in the story says that Esau requested of his brother to give him red soup. In exchange for special recognition, special status in the estimation of his father. So, in the language of symbol, Esau is to be understood as one having a special or certain mature sensitivity in preserving a social consciousness. And aligned with that is a particular strength to bring that consciousness and that sensitivity into existence in society. So as the story goes, Jacob usurped the birthright of Esau. And Esau went his way. And when Jacob saw him again, he was accompanied by 400 men. 400 men, a reference to an understanding and a commitment and the necessary ingredients to maintain or manage life in society. And when Jacob saw him with his 400 men, his four, and also Esau in the Bible, he's called a mountain. He's referred to as a mountain. When Jacob saw him with his 400 men, with his ability to address the feeding of the four rivers, with his ability to assess the meaning and importance of the four mountains, the four special realities of management in the earth for the Khalifa. And Jacob saw him, he bowed to him 7 times. I read a reference that refers to me as their leader. He's their leader. He's not our leader. He's their leader. Well, I accept that. I accept that they will never accept us or me. And I accept to go my way, which is Imam W.D. Muhammad's way. I accept to distinguish myself in his name with the same reasoning that he distinguished himself from them. I accept that they are an order unto themselves. I accept that those who associate with them, follow their leadership, represent a group. I accept to be separated from them. I don't ask you to do the same. I ask you only to follow in the same intelligent pathway and reason, in the same responsible, moral way that our brother Imam in Columbus and our brother Imam in Mobile has reasoned. And do not fear coming to the same conclusion that they have come to. I want nothing of recognition for myself from them. I want only what Islam wants for all of us. And that is what? As the Honorable Elijah Muhammad preached, freedom, justice, and equality. I want my own free mind. I want the justice of truth established in divine guidance. And I want equal opportunity to make a contribution to this world in the interest of the purpose for which God created man, to manage his affairs, to be responsible, to be productive. I know that I am fulfilling the expectation of Imam W. Deen Muhammad and so I say that there's no need for any further resurrection. We have been resurrected from the dead. And we are upon the resurrected path. And that is the path of the moral individual. ما خلقكم ولا بعثكم إلا كالنفس واحدة. Your creation and your resurrection are in no context except like your original reality. And what is our original reality? It is the consciousness of a moral being that comes by way of the reignition of our lifeline that began with the teaching of Mr. W.D. Farad and was carried forward as an invitation to a new life and identity by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And that matter, for its purpose, its destination, was concluded in the leadership of Imam W. Deen Muhammad. And for all times, every leader, male or female, will follow in that tradition and logic. And that identifies us as a people. And I am the first of those after them to register that consciousness. If you stand with me, then no, you are distinguished from a group that, in my opinion, usurped the birthright, but is not entitled to it. Praise be to Allah. Thank you for your patience and attention. And I hope that you will stay with us for a little while longer if you have some questions. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Praise be to Allah. So, as the Imam said, we have time for discussion, questions. If you have any questions, raise your hand in the Zoom chat. There's a button at the bottom of your screen that says reactions. And if you press that, it gives you the option to raise your hand so I can call on you. Okay, we have a question coming from Imam Hanif Abdul Wahid.
Assalamu alaikum, brother Imam.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother
And
Imam.
as always, good lecture. I just wanted to make a comment, and then I wanted you to comment on it from our leader, Imam W.D. Muhammad. He said that leadership is in the hands of the productive. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, thank you. I heard one person say that Imam Muhammad, that he said as instruction to the leaders at that time in the last months of his life, that they should go on in the way that way it is now. That's the words that they use, that the community should not change. It should go on in the way that it is now. My understanding of that and what you have quoted is that the community should continue with the recognition that Imam W. Deen Muhammad is leader, which would suggest too that that which he pointed to of what Islam is and the best representation of or best understanding of Muhammad the Prophet's leadership is also intact as a standard. Every need, every legitimate need in the life of a community with that understanding has to be addressed. So that requires that persons with sensitivity for maintaining particular institutions that hold up the life of a people, that they be free and supported, acknowledged and respected to produce within the context of that community with the recognition of its leadership. The need for educational institutions, the need for educational or expression of educational philosophy must be in the hands of persons who have that interest with a productive mind. Persons sensitive to what is necessary to maintain the resources, physical wealth of the community must be free to introduce strategies for productivity. Persons with ambition and qualifications to represent our interests, that is human interests, under God's authority and design, into the political consciousness of the American environment must be given support for their potential productivity in that interest. Whatever our needs are, physical needs, spiritual needs, psychological needs, must be trusted to persons with productive minds and interests. Their interest is not to bury intelligence. Their interest is not to bury skill. Their interest is not to bury a good spirit or positive spirit. Their interest is to free all of those things for the productive life of a whole people. That has to be the disposition of individual leaders. It also has to be the disposition of those who are responsible for developing leadership. Where do we find, where is the fertile field for these productive minds, or to identify these productive minds? It's in our young people. That's the fertile area, the fertile field. The disposition of leadership that recognizes the importance of a productive mind is going to search out and make it easy for young, progressive, promising potential to express itself and to support the interest going forward. So leadership is in the productive people. Leadership is in the attitude of those that make welcome productive interests, productive spirit, productive minds. Imam W.D. Muhammad said something to me once. He said, you know why most of these masjid, mosques are dark? He said, you never noticed that? He said the lighting in the places is dark. He said it's an indication that any bright bulb that comes in the community that challenges the skill set or ability of the local leader is immediately turned off. Well, what is that? That's darkness and death. So it's absolutely essential that we have an environment that invites the spirit of productive people, and that we guard it, that we don't let the skill set, ability, and interest, and most importantly, the spirit of productive people be oppressed, killed off. That's why our invitation is open and broad. And that whenever I see a productive person or potentially productive person, I'm welcoming them. I want to see them involved. I want to see them have responsibility. I want to see them, or want to encourage them to offer us whatever it is that they see that will assist us in growing and developing and becoming stronger. And I want to guarantee them, by way of the support of Islamic teaching, that they are supported for their leadership ability, for their leadership potential. And that is life. And if we have an opinion other than that, or we have a disposition other than that, that is death. The best leaders make a way for leadership. They don't kill leadership. They make a way for it. Thank you.
Praise be to Allah. So if anybody else has questions, go ahead and raise your hand. Imam, I wanted to ask you a question about the establishment of institutions. You spoke about every people being responsible for their own selves. And in doing so, people need to have their own institutions that support their own life. But obviously, if they don't have certain sensitivities, then they won't be able to build lasting institutions. Could you speak to what, from the perspective of Imam W.D. Mohammed, what are the sensitivities, or what are some of the requirements or prerequisites that there are for establishing institutions that would support our life as a people down through generations?
Well, firstly, an appreciation for I would say not just appreciation, but also a recognition. Before an appreciation, a recognition of the value of human life. To me, that's at the center, because if you're valuing your human existence, you are making yourself aware values, or you're aligning yourself with values that support that existence for its best possible performance. You're valuing conditions that will allow for its best possible performance. And eventually, if you're not a believer in God, you will become a believer through recognition of human ability and excellence. You'll become a believer that this human creation or human existence has purpose and order. And you will find that that purpose and order is determined by its creator and designer. And you will eventually come to want to have a relationship with that creator. And you will, if this evolution continues, you evolve to want to obey that creator. So institutions, according to the Islamic point of view, must begin with recognition of human value. And in that context, recognition of God's authority. So if we're pursuing educational institutions, so strengthening educational institutions, what should be the foundation or philosophy of that educational institution? It should be that first, human life is of excellence and value because God created it with purpose. And that everything that's in the environment of human life, or everything that's in the creation itself, is to support the development of that human life. So the initial foundation or first foundation of moral Islamic education is an appreciation for human identity and the moral, physical, or the ability in the physical environment to teach morality to that human consciousness. That has to be at the foundation of it. And divine guidance, which is the Quran, and Muhammad, the Prophet's leadership, is a partner to enabling that. But that's not the only discipline that logic belongs to. It belongs to the establishment of economic institutions as well. So the maintenance and distribution of the resources of the earth, governed by a moral conscience that is aligned with recognition of man and his purpose, and God as the creator of man and his purpose. And for every discipline for which we want to establish an institution, that logic applies. So educational institutions, economic institutions, political institutions, cultural institutions, all following the same references. And those references are the recognition of the value of human life, the recognition of values that support proper development of human life, recognition of human purpose as designated by man's creator, and ultimately obedience to man's creator in a particular discipline. And that discipline is Islamic discipline, Quran reasoning, Prophet Muhammad's model example. So all of our institutions have to be shaped with that as a foundation. And in order for that to happen, you have to have leaders who are sensitive to that, who are devoted to that, and who cooperate with one another for that. Person might say, well, you should begin with God consciousness first. No. No. God consciousness is inevitable once a person recognizes that they have value. We're not created of the physical. We don't have physical form before we have spiritual form. Spiritual form is first, then physical form. And then a spirit comes into that entity. All right. So flesh conditions the spirit to receive inspiration. And man becomes his full identity as a human when God gives him the spirit of obedience. So first recognition is to human value. Next recognition is to purpose. Next recognition is guidance. And that is the foundation for the building of institutions. So people that have that sensitivity, they will recognize, for example, Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching in forming institutions, and they won't hesitate to take from his teaching and form a philosophy of education, a curriculum of education. They won't fear that process. And when they look at models elsewhere, they're respecting that process in those people who have established those models. And they will take from the best of those models that will best serve their responsibility to manage their affairs. And that is a true institution. Just taking books from the state of, wherever you lived and saying, here's the standard for education. From where did those standards come? Those persons that wrote those textbooks, what are their sensitivities about human life? How do they view human life? What values do they hold up for human life? How are those things governed? How did they come to those conclusions? What are the influences that shape them? Well, that process as a responsibility belongs to all of us. All mankind has that as a management responsibility. And those that have been awakened again to what human life is supposed to be, according to the divine guidance, we have even a bigger responsibility. Because our responsibility is not only to correct the issues that have troubled us as a people and to bring us to where we're supposed to be as a people, but mankind in that process will, in us going through that process, the mankind on this earth can study us going through that process and improve their affairs. And that's the role of institutions. And we have yet to answer that responsibility. We have not answered that responsibility. Say, well, we have Claire Muhammad School in Atlanta, Georgia. The Claire Muhammad School in Atlanta, Georgia does not follow the philosophy of education of Imam W. Deen Muhammad. They take from every other area except from his. I'm talking about as a curriculum standard. Now, that's not to say that there aren't individual teachers within that school that have that as an influence, his teaching, his approach, our life as a spiritual force working for them. There are individual teachers in that institution that do that. And for that reason, that institution is saved. Because if it were not for those persons, that institution would just be carbon copy of whatever the philosophy of education is of the immigrant Muslims. The institution itself is saved because of the individuals who are teachers in that school who insist upon keeping Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching in focus, even though the curriculum of the school itself is not his philosophy. And so people will say, they might take from what I just said and want to create trouble. I don't care. I don't care that they take from what I said. I want them to take from what I said, but they use it for trouble. But it will reach people. It will reach people who have the right intentions. The biggest, most clear, I would say, the clearest condemnation of the present order of leadership is the fact that the schools in our community are virtually non-existent. And they give lip service to the schools. Like they'll say, well, we have a weekend effort. You have the resources, you have the personnel, you have the experience to have viable educational institutions, if not in every city, every major city, every major population center. But the leadership it is not a commitment. It is not a it is not the primary interest of the leadership. The primary interest of this order of leadership that threatens our life is ego recognition. They want the congregation and anybody observing to think of them as being learned people, when it was uneducated people who had a spirit for establishing our life with dignity that initiated and brought about our educational institutions in the first place. And that's not just associated with the African-American people, but with our community as well. It was persons that were not formally educated. They were, in many respects, self-educated, but they had an insistence on respecting our human worth. And by virtue of their commitment, institutions formed. This leadership order is condemned on that neglect. Absolutely, positively, across the board, condemned. And they can argue the point all they want. They have made the development of Claire Muhammad School in our community impossible. And have devalued our future because of that lack of emphasis. Among us is an elite educator, Sister Farida. She's an elite educator. And as time goes on, we will hear more and more from her. And I believe that history will say that what she represents was a new spirit coming into our people to establish our independent schools. And that she will be a focus for the development of the proper curriculum philosophy to support our schools as viable, permanent institutions, growing from elementary school level all the way to university level. That's my prediction. And I haven't said that to her. I'm saying it to you all. I never said that to her, not one time. I don't know if she's here today or not, but I haven't said that to her. Her name, I hope she forgive me if I'm embarrassing her. I don't want to embarrass her or her family. I mean, I don't think she'll be embarrassed. But her name is I spoke to her father. We talked about it. Her name is has in it the determination in her parents for what our life should be, according to upon what basis and what direction it should go. And I'm not going to say more than that. I probably said too much. But in other words, her name is a sign. And her sister's interest, her sister's a twin, they're twins. Her sister's interest is a sign. So where you know, when you have that kind of powerful situation, you know, responsible leadership is going to find where should this particular genius, in what field should we guarantee that it has the ability to develop? Not to say that I can determine what they should do specifically. That's not my job. That's not my role. But let us do whatever is possible or within our power to open up opportunity for them to influence the direction that we should go. And they, because of how they have been dedicated, will find their proper space. All we have to do is guarantee protection for that space, recognition of their value, and protection of that space. I have daughters, my adult daughters. Let me think if it's all of them. Just about all of them. My adult daughters are all educators, following in the footsteps of their mothers. Elementary school teachers, high school, middle school teachers, specialists in education, all of them, following in the direction of their mothers. So I know what I'm looking at when I'm looking at educators.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you. And the next question is coming from the sister that you were just talking about, Sister Farida.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Sister Farida. I hope I didn't embarrass you.
No. I mean, I'm humbled. My father was trying to get on the Zoom, but you know, the technology isn't working out today, but he's listening, and I am a product, you know, of Allah's mercy, the guidance of this community, the leadership of this community, and my wonderful parents. And of course, that name was given to me and my sister by Imam Deen Mohammed. He gave us our name. So, and I had a question, and I'm a little bit emotional now, because not only does it, you know, the weight of your sensitivities leading you to a certain responsibility, it's a heavy but a desirable a weight that I carry. But it also reminds me, you said your daughters, they follow in the footsteps of their mothers, and I too am walking in the footsteps of my mother, who was an educator, a lifelong supporter of this community and of human excellence and the excellence of our people. What you just said regarding leadership, this entire address, the talim you gave, it's just powerful, alhamdulillah. But what you just said about the foundation for building institutions, the recognition of human value, the recognition of purpose, the recognition of guidance. And I just thought about that in the context of, you know, we have Muslim American Leadership Day coming up, but the concept of Muslim American leadership and what you just said about opening, how leadership opens up opportunities, how it guarantees a protection of the space where genius can be recognized and realized and nurtured. And I'm just thinking about if you have any advice for us as we move forward with the platforms that you have created, about articulating that reality so that we can further invigorate our people. I think about in Newark and at Savior's Day, and I think we have opportunities, of course, also, on the internet, but also when we meet people in person in these spaces. Do you have any advice for how we might best articulate or these ideas so that we can inspire people to go out and act on the genius that Allah has placed in them? Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the message you delivered today, and I'm grateful for your leadership. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Praise be to Allah. Yes. So what we want to avoid is cosmetic relationship with our responsibility. In other words, it be made to appear that we are interested or committed, when in reality we're not. We want to avoid that artificiality, and really we want to discourage that kind of shallowness. We don't want to make a space for that. We don't want to make a give an opportunity for that to grow amongst us. It's an obligation on every individual to, when we come into contact with interested, innocent persons, individuals, that we have the spirit to invite them to participate with us, not the spirit to convert them to our community identity, but the spirit to invite them, to welcome them, to make an assessment. And once they made an assessment that favors us or positive toward us, to invite them to become a productive member. Now, if you in good conscience cannot invite a person to what it is that you associate with, then know that what you have associated yourself with is potentially damaging to you. So if you can't take the person that you know that's a good person to the masjid that you attend, you need to ask yourself why. Why are you attending? If the position that Brother Sabir Salim, who is a strong supporter of ours, was a strong supporter of Imam W.D. Mohammed, was a strong supporter of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. The position that he took in Washington, D.C., and the position that Brother Rashad Hassan, similar strong position, coming from similar sentiments and a similar history, where the challenge of looking at the truth of the reality, the truth of the situation, and saying to yourself, in good conscience, in the best spirit, am I comfortable inviting my most beloved family or friends to this environment and coming to the conclusion that I am not comfortable with it. Therefore, I'm not comfortable with it for myself. That is a courageous position. And that enables a person and groups of people to settle themselves upon what God has determined and has created as human purpose in a way that guarantees his protection of it. There's a reference in the Bible where the followers of Jesus Christ, they ask him about the weed that grows alongside the wheat, how to deal with it, because that weed threatens the wheat crop. And they asked him, should we pluck it out as we see it? And he said, no. He said, let it grow. And at the harvest, separate it, bundle it, and burn it. So what is this referring to? Okay, that inevitably, in every positive development for community life or human life in society, there is a challenge. There is something that is intended to destroy it. But ultimately, the presence of that thing strengthens it. And it strengthens it for its purpose. It permits it to establish that it belongs to a life trajectory and that this other thing belongs to a death trajectory. And once those things have matured for public view, then the responsible parties can take the moral responsibility to separate themselves from that growth and to set it aside for its intended destiny, which is death. And in our recognition, in our determination, in our commitment to see things done the right way, we distinguish ourselves from people who have other goals. But not until that matures in us is it obvious. Okay? Once we have matured in that particular interest, once we have matured in our devotion to the responsibility that we have, once we have matured in terms of bringing into reality our humane moral vision, it is at that point that we are distinguished from this other influence and entity. And that movement, you know, what you're seeing with regard to support for what we're doing and what we're talking about is an indication of that maturation process. And that is the necessary climate for our garden experiment. That's the necessary climate. And all of us who are together now and feeling positive about what I'm saying are all responsible gardeners. Every single one of us is a responsible entity for gardening, for keeping the garden in good repair, in good, and sometimes that means bundling the weed, bundling the weed and burning it for a whole community to witness. So what's that smoke over there? It's the bundling of that tear, as it's called in the Bible. I'll tell you something else. There's an imam his name means that. And Imam said, he said, I know an Imam whose name means that. He said, he looked up in the audience. He said, I don't see him today. He said, we're going to see if he tries to choke out the wheat. Now, I told Imam, I knew the name. I told him the name. He looked at me. He said, you got that? That was a long time. That was early in my work with him when I was in my early 20s. He said, I said, yes, sir, I got it. He said, he just looked at me and with a look like, keep it to yourself, but I approve. I don't want to tell you who that person is. It might be some of you all, well, you might be disturbed to know, but I won't mention it. Yes, so I hope that that's helpful to you, Sister Farida.
That looks like the last of the questions at this point.
Okay. So let's see. This is September. So we have coming up in October, the Muslim American Leadership Day. And maybe a week or two before that, there was a program or a leadership convention of some kind in Orlando, Florida. And I saw the advertisement for it. And I thought to myself that I would like to attend. That was a few weeks ago. And then I saw I saw the interaction between some brothers associated with me and the one of the persons organizing that. And that interaction led to my direct interaction with this person. And I saw in that interaction that the interest of this group continues to be the strategy to usurp the birthright of Esau. And what I mean by that is that it doesn't matter to them what Imam W.D. Muhammad's picture of leadership and community is. It matters only to them how they interpret that for their interests in the space where Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching appears to align with their interests. They embrace him. In the space where it conflicts with their interests, they have another language they use for the initiated members of their group to signal them that we're not going with this. My interaction with this person, I gave some history and perspective on various things that this person was introducing into the spirit of our community. And quickly the person understood that my experience and understanding was of a more significant depth than his on these particular issues. And he didn't want to risk that the exchange be extended to expose his superficial understanding of Imam W.D. Muhammad's intent That let me know that unlike Jacob and Esau's story, where Jacob bows 7 times to Esau when he sees him approach with the 400 men, these persons are rotten and corrupted. The 7 prostrations of Jacob to Esau was recognition in all of the areas of productive intelligence of man, Esau's understanding of what was necessary to build human life and society. And the fact that this leadership refuses to even have a honest exchange with me in the open. I'll give you an example of what I mean. When the whole issue came about for us, the possibility of us visiting Mobile, Imam Ronald Ali, he said to me, he said that the Imam of the Masjid, he wants to have the opportunity to meet you and to interact with you, to get some concerns of his answered. And what I said to Imam Ronald Ali, and he can tell you, this is what I told him. I said, well, I don't have any problem with that, but let the Imam know that there's not anything that he can ask me personally that he can't ask me publicly. He can ask me whatever he wants publicly, and I will answer him the same way. You want to know about the circumstances leading to me being in prison? I'll answer you. You want to know about the accusations made against me by a person saying that I stole money, etc.? I'll answer you. I'll answer you the same way privately and publicly. There's not any question you can ask me that I'm not prepared to answer in an open and transparent way. But you don't, not him necessarily, but him as a representative of this order, because he belongs to this order too. But they're asking, and their interest in my answers is only to put those answers in a certain category of guilt. They don't want the truth of it. They want to constantly cast it in the category of guilt. But none of it is an expression of guilt. It's all an expression of truth. And in as much as it's an expression of truth, it's an expression of innocence. And they don't want people to view me as innocent, because if people view me as innocent, then they will see what Imam W.D. Muhammad was saying about me from the beginning. That goes against their agenda. It's disingenuous to suggest that I'm argumentative, that I'm antagonistic. That's not my spirit. It never has been. Also, I heard recently that I'm bullish, that I impose myself on people. And I look at you all and ask you, have I imposed myself on any of you? And then they say, oh, he's too reserved. They say that one too. He's too shy to be, the thing about it is that the reality, you don't want, it's not in your interest, your leadership agenda interest, to have an open exchange with me. And I'm gonna tell you, in the words of a former boxing trainer, one of my sons was a promising young boxer, and he was on track to be on the Olympic team, and he made a decision to not continue. But what he was, his coach or his trainer was saying to me, he said, Muhsin, that's his name. He said Muhsin would be a better professional than amateur. He said because of his style, he said a a person in the fight with him, they might win on points in the first 2 or 3 rounds because he's a defensive fighter. He said, but Muksin would take them into the deep water in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, and they couldn't survive because he would outlast them, and then his physicality would overcome them in those late rounds. So in other words, with regard to these people, give the people the space and time to have an open dialogue with me, present your reasoning, and permit me to respond to it. And they will see how shallow you are, how irresponsible and ill-prepared you are for the task at hand. And it will become known widely for what reason Imam W.D. Muhammad prepared me and how capable I am for the purpose. I'll tell you this, within this group here, you all have to be more confident in my ability. Don't limit me because of your fear. When I say that I'm qualified to speak to whomever on our behalf, believe me that I have been prepared for that qualification. But if the opportunity doesn't present itself, none of us will see it. It is your responsibility to work for those opportunities. You want to see our message on the talk programs, the public affairs programs in the public of this country and the public discussion of this country, then pursue that and see what the response is. We might not be able to get on every program, but we'll get on some. And our message will be out there in a way that we can all share in the pride of it. And also as an influence to reach new minds. But if you have fear yourself in approaching those institutions, then it retards our ability to communicate our message. So stop going to the local masjid and thinking that they're going to respond to what we're talking about. You think that approaching the local masjids in Newark is going to fill up that audience at Muslim American Leadership Day? No possible way. You can spin your wheels forever trying to get those local imams to come and endorse our program and get the people to come. It'll never happen. Forget it. Forget that as a strategy. Get out there and talk to the productive minds in Newark and say, this is our leadership and this is our perspective. And we believe that it's a perspective that human society needs, Newark needs, this country needs, and we invite you to participate with us. I guarantee you that they will respond. But as long as we have this mind that we got to go to these folks who have already rejected us, and that's what we learned from this experience with Mobile. It doesn't make any difference how we approach them. They are going to reject us. It is their agenda to reject us. And you have to understand that that rejection is not of Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. That rejection is of Imam W.D. Muhammad's thinking, his influence, his leadership, his direction, his understanding. Because if you look at each one of these individuals, while on the surface they identify with Imam W.D. Muhammad, in their beneath the surface, their commitment is to a ritual, limited, oppressive view of what Islamic life is and what God has created human life for. And that's why they appear so uncomfortable with Imam W.D. Muhammad. They would act like they were intimidated by him. But what was intimidating them, or what was making them uncomfortable, was his moral strength. And it's the same thing with me. They found a way to corrupt the picture of Imam W.D. Muhammad's succession. And so this is what it means in the story of Jacob and Esau, that Jacob slew Esau with his bow, that he struck him with his bow. So it means that they concocted a scheme based on the sensitivities in the internal, the bow, the string on the bow comes from the tendons of animals. And so from the internal, most, I would say, intimate internal matters, they concocted a scheme and cast it into the sky to influence the whole community. That was their scheme against me. And they think it prevails, but ultimately it only prevails with those who accept their leadership. If you had a question in your soul about their agenda, even if it was a small one, you're open to hear the proper influences coming from the successor of Imam W.D. Muhammad. And once you open to that and you start to make an assessment on your own, you begin to make a comparison and you say, this is what they're talking about, this is what they're advocating, this is their this is their interpretation of this, and this is his. And when I listen to Imam Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad, what does it put me in the mind of? It puts me in the mind of Imam W.D. Muhammad. So much so that their response to me is that he sounds like Imam W.D. Muhammad. He's just Imam W.D. Muhammad. Well, what the fuck do you expect? Excuse my expression. I know that's offensive, but this language sometimes is used to reach the matter. What is your expectation of leadership? And how have you influenced our people in their expectations of leadership? So you have influenced them to turn away from and to trivialize and marginalize and belittle that which Imam W.D. Muhammad appealed to. And you think I don't see it? I am the one he trained to see your scheme. Like he said of his father, he said his father only trained a few to walk his walk when the time came. There are things that I understand that were given to me directly and indirectly. I understand where he placed emphasis. I understand what he wanted to accomplish. I understand what he wanted to preserve. I understand what he wanted to protect. I understand the references from the Quran that he used to shape that disposition and philosophy. And I know it in a mature way. I know it in a graduated way, in an evolved way. I don't just know it on the surface. I know it deep within me. It is my life conviction. And none of them are my equal. Say, well, oh, this brother, he knows, he's good in Arabic and he's good teaching the Quran. Yes, he's that. And we applaud him for that. But when it comes to understanding the importance and context for that in the spirit and direction and continuation of what our life is supposed to be, he is not the equal of W.D. Muhammad's successor. There is not a person in this community, in this leadership, that has that confidence and can articulate it with this kind of clarity, except Earl Abdul Malik Muhammad. We visited a place, and I just conclude with this quickly. Hampton Roads area of Virginia, Norfolk, Hampton, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Chesapeake, these cities. And I was invited to come there as a representative of Imam W.D. Muhammad to help them organize themselves to bring him there. I told the Imam about it, that they had given me this invitation. Now, I didn't accept any invitation, except that the Imam knew about the invitation. And he would tell me if he thought that I should accept it or not. And when I told him about it, he said, yes, you should accept. But he told me too, he said, I don't have much confidence in what can develop there. That's what he told me. So we worked with them and we had a program there. And about 2,000, almost 3,000 people came. Imam came to the auditorium where we had the program. He looked out on the audience, saw all those people. And then he said, well, son, I didn't think it was possible. He said, but you've done it again. He said that in front of all of them, in front of the audience. And what was he talking about? He was talking about the ability to interpret his teaching in a way that it would be understood as a benefit for all people as he intended it. The transmission of that into another time frame is what he was talking about. In other words, he saw in me that his teaching would live. Now, do you think that if he saw that, they didn't see it too? And that they didn't have a strategy to stop it? By convincing the people, oh, we got the last instructions. You a liar. You're just a liar. There's no possible way that Imam W.D. Muhammad was going to entrust the last instructions to his community to Yahya Abdullah. No possible way. What would make us think that would be his choice? Did he put Imam Yahya Abdullah before us to tell us, or to point at him in a way that would make us think that he's going to carry forward the most important instructions for the life of our people? Show me the evidence of that. Show me the evidence of it in the public record. There is none. So to make that assertion, and these are his words. I'm not telling you something he didn't say. He said it. I heard him say it. He said that he had been given last instructions from a dying man. A quote. I'm quoting him. Just a bold lie. For what purpose? To serve an agenda. To serve a leadership agenda that would take advantage of the spirit of the people and manipulate that spirit. Now, people that have that in them to do to a whole people cannot be trusted. You say, well, you know, that's what they mean about you being antagonistic. You should just call that out to the brother himself. Listen, if there was an opportunity for me to talk to these individuals one-on-one, that they would welcome that, you think I wouldn't have taken that opportunity? That opportunity doesn't exist. They have sent spies around me, even while I was in prison. People representing their interests visiting me like they're my friend. And I'm sharing with them, open with them, talk to them, honest with them, straight with them, respond to all their interests and all their concerns. For what purpose? For them to carry that information back and see how they're going to strategize to defeat us. So you have a leader in me who has been prepared for the purpose. And my strength is your strength. My courage is your courage. Because it is really you that refuse to choke down the vomit. Just not going to choke it down. And if you were choking it down, you refuse to do it anymore. So I apologize to you all that using language that's can be interpreted as vulgar language, but really in the way I use it, it's not vulgar. It's in the moral interest. But I know it can be offensive. And I don't have that interest at all to be offensive. But our enemies, our adversaries, they need to know that they're dealing with a man of strength. That they don't intimidate me. And they won't back me up. And if necessary, I will push right through them. They should thank Allah that I have upon me the discipline of Islamic life and belief in Allah's mercy. Because if I was a tyrant, it would be a bad situation for them. And I'm not that. I am a person wanting to do things the right way in accordance with what is established as decency before God, with Muhammad the Prophet as leader, and Imam W.D. Muhammad as our reference in what way we should move forward. Okay. I saw someone's hand. Yes, okay. I see Brother Elijah.
Yes, sir. Brother Elijah, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Imam.
Wa alaikum assalam.
As you were saying, in a graduated way, you have your own, higher level. I was thinking of innate, elevated, universally, in a universal way,
Yes. Yes.
which is, higher education.
Yes, yes. Yeah, what I mean by, I don't mean that I'm better than them.
No, I know.
Like I have some kind of arrogance. First of all, it's not my nature to begin with.
Right.
I was taught decency and humility by my people, my family, my people, my mother and father. They're strong people, but they're very humble people. They don't make a big issue. They don't invite attention to themselves, or they don't have even vocabulary that would suggest that they have any manner of arrogance or anything like that. They don't even have that vocabulary. I grew up in a home where moral values and moral reasoning were supreme. My father, he would challenge me to think correctly on any number of issues. He would take myself and my friends, who all of us went to the same school. He would sometimes take us to school in the morning, and we young men, young boys, adolescent, teenagers, all of us athletes. So You know, we had that characteristic as well, nature to compete, you know, and he would change the subject in the car from whatever we were talking about to something that had some real importance. And he would challenge each one of us to give an opinion on an intelligent opinion on whatever there was the question of the day. And you know, each of my friends, they knew that was coming at some point in that ride to school, because the school where we grew up is a little distance from where the school was. So it was about 45-minute drive. And so all of my friends knew, you know, here it comes. Mr. Hill gonna ask us something about it. So they knew to prepare an answer, and an intelligent one. Because my father, he would say, that doesn't make any sense. What are you talking about? You didn't even think about that response. And it didn't matter if it was me or one of them, you know. And the questions he would be asking us was of the, generally speaking, of the moral disposition of our community, African-American community, and its leadership. So my evolution to a moral consciousness begin with, not with Islam in my life or with the Quran. It's completed with that, but that's not where it started. And just as the Imam, you know, he would say that his idea or his understanding of what Islam is as it evolved was not responsible for his morality. You know, his morality, his understanding of decency and good and what is not good was formed by his mother and father and the environment that he grew up in. That's responsible for it. So that's true of most of us. That's true of most of us. Now, my children, they would say perhaps that Islamic discipline has shaped them, but they would also say it was their parents' devotion to that discipline that shaped them too. And most of us that have a moral conscience, it was shaped by our parents, you know, and the challenges that we witnessed in them, and what they wanted us to know was of value. And because of that, we can appreciate what Islamic teaching is and where we should align ourselves in Islamic teaching or so-called Islamic teaching. Because some of what is identified as Islamic teaching goes against that. My daughter was asking me just the other day about some reference in the Quran to hijab, the term hijab. And we had a very productive discussion on that issue. And the conclusion was that what is presented as Islamic teaching, for the most part, outside of our community, outside of Imam W.D. Muhammad's teaching, the emphasis is ritual life, which violates what we were taught about what Islam is. Islam is freedom, okay? Freedom for what? Freedom to think. More than anything else, freedom to think. So we're not subjected to just a ritual representation of what our Islamic life is. And it doesn't govern us. Are we seeing this? Did you all see what I just saw? Boy, I tell you, the shaitan is active at work. I hope that you all didn't see what I saw. Thank Allah that we are in the position that we're in to prevail against the schemes of the shaitan. So, yes, Brother Elijah, I'm not suggesting in any way that I'm higher than these persons. I'm only suggesting that my understanding is evolved. And in part because Imam W. Muhammad, he shared things with me, but also because of my interest. If I wasn't interested in those things, he wouldn't have shared them with me. He saw that I had the interest, and he cultivated it. And believe me, it was tested too. There were situations that tested that commitment, and he observed how I responded to those tests. He didn't come up with some test to test me, but circumstances would test you, and he saw how I responded. Chicago was a very difficult situation for us, for me, and he saw how I responded to it, how I endured. Poverty was a particular test on me. He saw how I responded to it. Once a person asked him, how should I see him? Talking about me, this person asked the Imam, how should I see him? Imam said, he was annoyed with the question coming from this person. And he said, I'm not going to cheapen him or myself by responding to you. He said, but let me just tell you this. He said, he has forgotten. Now think on this for a moment. He told this brother who was an Imam, he said, Abdul Malik has forgotten more dawah than you will ever do. So that closed his mouth. But the boldness of these people, I would never do things that they did, not in a million years. It wouldn't even cross my mind. Person actually sat there and asked the Imam, how do you see this brother? Imam was so annoyed with that. How do I see him? You know who he is to me. He had to tell another one, well-known person, had been a minister for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and well-established in the leadership for years and years and years. And he told him, he saw how he treated me. And he said, you all need to grow up. He said, you know this man to be my most important assistant. He said, your treatment of him is your treatment of me. We were on the elevator, going up in the elevator. And we got to the floor that we were going. He told them, stay back. He'll go with me to my room. You all stay back. Tell you another occurrence. I'll conclude with this. This is all just to give you the reason that many of the reasons why I've come to the conclusion about what I should be doing now. We were in the car with him in a city on the West Coast. And we stopped somewhere. And in the car was the driver, who was the Imam of that city, myself, Wallace D. Muhammad II, and Imam W. D. Muhammad. We stopped somewhere. It was in a parking lot. And so the brother the Imam, I'll just tell you who it was, Abdul Karim Hassan in Los Angeles. He exited the car, and the Imam was sitting in the front seat, and Wallace and I were sitting in the back. and Abdul Karim Hassan got out of the car, and Wallace got out of the car. And so the only person sitting in the car was myself and the Imam. So the Imam said to me, he said, call Wallace. So I rolled down the window and I said, Wallace, your father wants to speak to you. So Wallace came over to the car. No, pardon me. Imam said, get Wallace. So I opened the door. He said, no. He said, you stay. He said, just roll down the window and call him. So I called him. Wallace came over. The Imam rolled down the window like that much. Not the big, you roll the window down all the way. He rolled it down like that much, a little bit. And he said to Wallace, he said, are you with them? Are you with Brother Abdul Malik and myself? Wallace said, I'm with you, Daddy. He said, no. He said, that's not what I asked you. He said, are you with them? Or are you with Brother Abdul Malik and myself? He said, I'm with Brother Abdul Malik and you, Daddy. He said, then get in the car. And I can tell you other experiences over many years that solidified the relationship that I had with Imam W.D. Muhammad, and which characterizes his trust in me for this purpose that we all are sharing right now. So this situation is allowing me to go into some things, but I know the time is, we're at the limit of our time. But yes, go ahead, Brother Elijah.
Yeah, just one more question. A question. I don't believe the team from Newark has invited you to the mayor's breakfast. So I'd like to take out that time to do that. So
What is that? What is that?
September 30th.
What is it exactly? What is it, the mayor's breakfast? What is that?
It's based on, pulling the people together for progress, business, etc. So it's on the 30th.
So do they is it something that the office of the mayor, that they extend the invitation to people, or is this open to the public?
It's up, he invites the whole public free. I mean, they have tickets they give out. And so we got our tickets when we went to the men's meeting. And so they give the tickets out to whoever want a ticket. Until they're all gone. And but I just was looking at it as an opportunity, not for you to just be there, but some kind of way we try to make it connect you with him. Make an effort to connect you with him.
Okay. Okay.
And it's going to be a lot of it's going to be a lot of other people there, dignitaries there.
I see. But mainly it's residents of Newark, right? People that live in Newark.
Yes, mainly,
Yeah. So what I would feel most comfortable with is that you all that are there, that you attend and you represent us, and invite the mayor or people close to him to participate with us in our meeting in October.
Right.
We intend. My sense of some of the, if I was a person, if I lived in Newark, then I wouldn't hesitate to come to be part of that. But I think it's more appropriate for the people that live there to participate and to just make him aware of what we're doing.
Right. Yeah. So that's
and
what we.
And then if he if it's in his interest to meet us and to invite us, or he welcome us to visit him, then we're happy to do that.
Right. Well, we plan on giving him one of your books, and some other significant people one of your books.
Thank you.
And so
Thank you.
in the process of doing that, we'll convey what we got coming up on Muslim American Leadership Day.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a lot of respect for him. And I believe he's a good man, good mayor, good man. It's not easy, that job. Mayor of a city, big city like Newark, not easy. Hard job.
Right.
So we just let him know that we're strongly identifying with his leadership, and that we're praying for his success as mayor, and we're praying for the people of Newark and the strength of the people of Newark, and that our visit to Newark is in that spirit, in that interest.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good.
All right. So that's
Let me just say this one last thing here. I mentioned this before. I became aware that in Newark, that a sister, I don't know who the sister is, was giving out the flyer advertisement for our meeting in one of the messages, and that they told her not to do that. And I got the impression that that she was disturbed by it. And so a person who is giving out invitation to a meeting of ours already is a person of courage and strength. If that person is troubled by something that someone says in opposing they're distributing something like that, that tells me that they were being intimidated. And I don't want conflict with any of these brothers, but at the same time, they need to understand that it won't be tolerated that our people are intimidated. We're not going to tolerate that, especially women. You want to intimidate somebody, try to intimidate somebody, try to intimidate one of these brothers. But you're going to jump on a sister? We're not tolerating that. If a conversation need to be held, a conversation need to be had, then speak to Brother Calvin. Speak to Brother Darrell. Speak to Brother Elijah. Speak to Brother Mubin. Or speak to all of them together. But we're not having no intimidation of people wanting to innocently invite a program devoted to the distribution of truth and righteousness, goodness. So every now and then, we need to let these people know that you don't own these places. I don't care if a person is far removed from that masjid. If they ever made a contribution to pay the lease or rent or pay the imam a salary or support any program, they have a right to express themselves in these congregations, in these settings. If you're not disrupting something or causing trouble or creating a bad spirit or undermining someone, there should be no problem. I'm sure that they allow the distribution of literature from any other program, even programs that are not even associated with us. So I don't know, maybe you all need to have a conversation with them. Let them know. Don't do that. You'll find another person that you're dealing with, and you don't want to see that person. So we're not tolerating that. And so that sister, let her know that we don't want to violate anybody's rules or anything. But I get the impression that this sister was not violating any rules, that she probably has seen others passing out literature and felt that she was perfectly within her comfort to invite people to something that's good. So you understand what I mean by this. We don't want confrontation with people, but we want them to understand you're not going to step on us. So thank you very much. Praise be to Allah. And we look forward to our program in Newark. And also we have, I think I talked to Imam Ibrahim, I think we're going to be visiting Detroit in December. We had a problem in September, and it was the fault of the office, our office. It's not the fault of anyone else. And we have Sister Khadija and Sister Zakia in Detroit. They're going to assist us in making sure that everything is in place as it should be in Detroit when we visit there again. So I thank Allah that we have that. We have persons of that quality protecting our interests in Detroit. Detroit is a very important city for our life. And we're not going to neglect it. We're going to continue and be there on a regular basis, inshallah. Well, that's all I have today. Thank you for your patience.
Praise be to Allah. So we will close out with Imam W.D. Muhammad's dua of purification and purpose. Oh Allah, we cannot manage this life for ourselves, not without you. Please make our life what you want it to be, what you prefer it to be. Do not allow us to act on our own. Help us to act only in obedience to you. We hear you, we obey you, we look to you for forgiveness, our Lord, and to you is the destination. Amen. Assalamu alaikum.
Bye.